And welcome back. We have a 2004 Toyota Camry, and it's just a little bit, and I mean just the tiniest little bit past due for its brakes. So we're gonna go ahead and get the brakes done today. Now you always want to lift up your car with your floor jack, but do not rely on the floor jack. We're gonna use jack stands because it's the safest thing to do. Now since I have an impact gun, I'm lifting up the vehicle first and then I'm gonna remove the lug nuts. But if you do not have an impact gun, make sure to loosen your lug nuts while the vehicle is still on the ground. You may notice all of the stuff coming off of the rim here, but trust me, it's not friction material off of the pads. It's actually like a very fine metal. So that right there gives you a good indication of how bad these brakes are. Once your vehicle is secure on a jack stand, you want to get in it and turn the wheel to the left because we're working on the driver's side here. If you're working on the passenger side, make sure you turn your steering wheel all the way to the right, and that's just going to give you better access to the back of the caliper. Here I'm using a small prying tool, or you could even use a flathead screwdriver and just pry against the caliper, and all that's going to do is compress the piston and just help you remove the caliper a little bit easier if it's hanging up on the pads. You can see that the caliper is held onto the caliper bracket via two fasteners, but you only have to remove the lower fastener like I'm doing here, because the top one you can just slide it right out of its bore, so there's no need to remove the top bolt. And wow, look at this. There's no brake pad at all. It's completely gone. And this small piece inside of here that looks like a tin foil, that's what's left of the brake pad. It's pretty crazy. The only thing that was pressing against the rotor was the piston on the caliper. Yeah, it's pretty bad, but honestly, still, it's not the worst thing I've seen. I've seen a lot worse. So let's try to compress this piston, and so far it's not looking good. At this point, if you cannot compress your piston, the caliper is pretty much junk. I did manage to use my very large pliers, as you see, and just kind of get it started and get it forced back in. The caliper still functions at this point, but I did tell the customer and recommend that, yeah, you should change this caliper because the piston itself is wore down. It's no longer flat. It's and even the dust boot on the piston is torn. So it's still gonna function. It's still gonna do its job, but I did recommend replacing this caliper. And the tool that I'm using to compress the piston is a very inexpensive tool that you could get at your local auto parts store. It works great. Just don't force it. Like in a situation like this where the piston did not want to go in, if you force it, you're gonna end up breaking your tool. And trust me, I know, because I'm on my second one for this very reason. And now that we slid the caliper off of its top slide pin, we're just gonna go ahead and hang it up. And here I have a hook that's dedicated to hanging calipers. I know it seems silly, but that's what it's for. You could use anything, a zip tie, a string, a hanger, it doesn't matter. You just wanna support your caliper. Don't leave it hanging off of the brake hose because you can damage it. And now it's time to remove the caliper bracket, but don't let the bracket fall, because if it... Alright, I'm just gonna show myself out. Yeah, basically remove the caliper bracket. You may want to use a breaker bar because sometimes those two bolts that hold on the bracket can be on there pretty tight. And here we get a really good look at the back of the rotor. You can see the condition that it's in, and yeah, it's just destroyed. Now with the rotor off of the hub, it's a good opportunity to go ahead and clean up the hub. If you see a lot of rust on it, just try to get it off. You could use a wire brush, but I like to use this tool right here, which is dedicated to cleaning hubs, and it works great. It's really fast. You could use it on your drill or your pneumatic tools. It doesn't matter, but it does a great job. The main purpose is you just want to get the rust off of it, and you want a nice flat surface for the new rotors to sit nice and flat on it. Now before you just go ahead and slap your new rotors on your car, you're gonna have to clean them off first. And I'm using brake parts cleaner here, but you could easily use soap and water. It works just as well. And the reason why you have to clean them is because normally they come with oil on them, and the oil is just to prevent them from rusting. So you want to make sure you clean all of that oil off so you don't contaminate your new brake pads. And now I'm just going to apply a thin layer of anti-seize on the inside of the rotor, right where it's going to mate up against the hub. You could also put this on the hub if you wanted to. Sometimes I do it that way. It doesn't really matter where you decide to put it. But the anti-seize just, it goes a long way. It just helps the next time you have to do the brakes that everything just comes off a lot easier. Now that I've removed all of the brake hardware off of the caliper bracket itself, there is a layer of rust on here, and you want to make sure you get all of that rust off, and that's what I'm using the file for. I'm not trying to take any material off of the bracket itself. I'm just trying to take off that layer of rust, and that's really what's key in all of this, because when you put the new shims on or the new brake hardware in place, you want your brake pads to be able to move nice and freely. You should not have to use any force to put them in. So by taking off this rust, it really helps with that. Now, to anyone who's been on my channel long enough knows that I have a lot of brake videos, and I know it gets very repetitive and it seems boring and it's like the same thing over and over. But really, I can't stand when people put up videos that are just so vague. I mean, Chris Fix. You know, it's like people want to search for their specific car and how to fix or do something. You know, if I have a 95 Civic and someone put up a video on how to do your brakes, but they're showing a 2002 Mustang, I mean, it's kind of irrelevant. You know what I mean? I know the same general idea applies to brakes, but you gotta understand, people are here for a reason, to learn how to work on their cars, and that's why it just really grinds my gears when people put up these very vague titles on their videos just to get the views in. And before I reinstall the caliper bracket, I'm going to use a little bit of blue thread locker on all of the fasteners that I removed. They didn't have it under when I took them off, but it's just a force of habit to go ahead and apply some blue thread locker. It's just like added security. And you want to make sure you torque all of your fasteners down to spec. You don't want to over tighten anything, and you also don't want to leave anything loose, which is why I really encourage using a torque wrench if you're going to do this job yourself. And here's what I talked about earlier, how I'm installing the brake pads and it's not taking any force at all. They're going in nice and smooth, and that's how it should be. You should not have to hammer in your brake pads or file down the ears or anything like that. And now it's time to clean all of the old caked on grease onto the slide pins and just apply a fresh coat of grease, and that's going to go a long way. Every time you do this to your brakes, you want to make sure you service your slide pins, and this one down here is actually seized in place. And who knows, maybe this could be the reason of why or what happened to this whole brake system on this side of the vehicle, that the pad is just non-existent. Yeah, sure, the brake pads could have been changed a lot sooner, but things like this, when the slide pins just don't want to work correctly, could cause problems as well. So don't just go ahead and slap your whole system back together if one of your slide pins is stuck like this, because it's gonna come right back around and bite you in the you know what. So yeah, sometimes these are under really good where I have to take them off, take them over to the vise, clamp them down real tight. You even have to put like a torch and heat up the bracket itself just to be able to get this slide pin out. But if you're just stuck, just do all you can to get it out, clean all the old grease and gunk off of it, and put a fresh coat of grease on it. Now I know you can't see this, but I'm actually using my hammer to hit my flathead screwdriver and just kind of walk that slide pin out of its bore, because it is in there pretty good. So at this point, I've gone ahead and cleaned off as much rust as I can and just try to get the slide pin nice and clean. And like I said earlier, a fresh coat of grease is going to go a long way. So just go ahead and reinstall it, and as you can see how easily I can move it now back and forth, and it even spins without any problem. So now we could go ahead and install the upper slide pin, which is still attached to our caliper at this point. And we're gonna go ahead and lay the caliper down and get our fastener. And again, a little bit of blue thread locker here. You don't have to, it's just a personal preference of mine. And go ahead and torque this fastener down as well. And now you can go ahead and reinstall your wheel, snug down all of your lug nuts, pull out your jack stand, and now lower your vehicle back onto the ground. And once the vehicle is on the ground, you could go ahead and torque all of your lug nuts down to spec. Now with that done, do not forget to put your hubcap back on if you have one. And one very important thing is, before you get in your car and turn it on, make sure you push the brake pedal a few times. You want to build up pressure back in your system before you even turn the car on. And that's it. So don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Patreon, you know, all that social media garbage. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you're considering subscribing, don't forget to hit that notification bell. And like always, thanks for watching.